Hey everybody, how's everyone doing? Just gonna give everyone a couple minutes to trickle in here. Let's see. It looks like there's a lot of note takers in, so I guess we can let those in. We'll give it one more minute or so. Go ahead and get started from there. But let everyone get on in here. Mm-mm. Can everybody see the screen that I've pulled up? Just double checking before we get started. Cool. Appreciate that. All right. We can go ahead and get kicked off. I'll keep an eye on people coming in here as we go through it. But um, to introduce myself, my name is Cole Capros. I am a solutions architect here at Enforcer. I know most people who've hopped on this are probably expecting to see Dakota. I'm actually covering for her today and will be running through the presentation on from set and forget to tenant governance. So conversation remains the same. We'll be able to walk through how we're going to help out with that, give you ideas on, where you guys should go with setting your tenants up and how you're able to run a managed service model to actually create a revenue stream for what you're doing on the back end. Um, as you guys have probably talked in the past with Dakota on the last one, I will keep an eye on the chat if we're able to use that for like Q&A as we're going through. By all means, fire questions over. I will be trying to read that as I'm going through it so you guys can get live time answers. Um, the slide deck isn't too long, to be honest. And personally, that's my PowerPoint's the worst thing ever for me. So by the end of this, what I will want to do is, if we have time, hop into Enforcer and show you guys a little bit of how we can actually help with the managed service piece of this. So that way, when you're looking at renaming policies, detecting drift, pushing policy, how we're able to quickly help you guys remediate all that. So with that being said, let's get on into it. So last time we talked, or you guys talked with Dakota, we made the statement that the tenant is the new server. And today, really, what we're going to drill into is why it's important to continue to run your tenant with that managed service piece. We had probably had the conversation that you wouldn't run a server without an RMM tool. Why are you running a tenant without using something like Enforcer or actually providing that managed service piece towards it? And that's the whole point of this set and forget to move to tenant governance. We want to continue to update these servers or these tenants. We want to continue to run them like they were a server. You wouldn't want to run a server and not patch it ever. That's just kind of a bad case scenario for something wrong is going to happen there. That's the same thing with the tenant. If you set it up and then you don't do anything to it, that's just asking for a recipe for disaster right there. So there's going to be a breach. And today we want to kind of paint that picture and give you guys an understanding of how, one, you can automate this process and we can help out with that. And then two, how you guys are able to actually bill for this process. Because this is something that should be the new revenue stream for you because you're already doing in the background. Let's figure out a way that we can help you guys make some additional revenue off it as well. So for anybody that just jumped on or, who's been listening to me talk here for the last few seconds, you might be asking, like, who is Cole? Like I mentioned, I'm one of our solutions architects here at Enforcer. So I work directly with Dakota on our team. I've been in the space for roughly 6 years. 5 of them were at PAX 8. If anybody's familiar with the distributor, I was on the Microsoft consulting team over there. So Microsoft is not new to me. I used to handle all M365, O365, Dynamics, Power Platform, the Microsoft programs questions. So I used to joke and say I kind of wish I went to college to earn a degree for that. It is quite the extensive knowledge that you have to kind of keep up to date with them because they make changes every single day. And as you see, we'll go through this PowerPoint. It's kind of similar when it comes to conditional access, things like that. They're never changing companies. So really want to make sure that you guys feel comfortable in how you use Microsoft, but that's what I'm here to help out with. So Microsoft Focus and Certified, I do hold the MD 102, the AZ 900, MS 900, the Power Platform 900, working on the Copilot one as well. So Most of the time when I'm working in Enforcer or what I've been doing to help our partners out, to give you background on like what I do on a day to day, is we help with translating compliance frameworks like NIST, ISO 2701, CMMC, CIS into ways that are consumable for partners to be able to establish their baselines and be able to push policy out. So they're providing a secure framework. So what we're helping out with is making sure that when you guys are looking at your environment, creating a golden image, we're creating a secure baseline. From there, what Enforcer is going to be able to help out with is tailoring that unique experience to each customer. Because end of the day, when you're starting and looking at building out your security, what you're going to want to do is take a look at what's secure first. From there, we want to tailor it to each customer so you're not prohibiting what they're able to do on a day-to-day too much. But in the back of your mind, you say, I've pushed out these policies. Everything's in a gold image up to our standard. From here, we can do the fine tuning. A lot of that will make more sense once we get into this a little bit deeper, but just know day to day, we're helping with architecting your guys' golden image. That way, your customers have that tailored experience to what they're looking at. Cool. So, who is Enforcer? If this is your first time hearing about us, or if you've been on a call before, we are a UKH or HQ, but we're globally present across the world. So we do have offices in the US, UK, Australia, and a couple other places in EMEA. So we're all over the world. We are MSP focused though. So it means we'd sell to MSPs. We do not sell to customers. And in-house, that's an outdated number, but we do have 170 MSP experts that are working directly with our customers. So, anybody that's working at Enforcer comes with a background of MSP. So we do have understandings, I would say that lightly, of the pains that you go through because everybody's experiencing different things. But that way we're able to tailor the conversation to where you guys are at, how we can help you meet you on your journey to becoming the largest MSP that you want. 50,000 tenants secured also is a number that I think would be boosted up at this point. We're probably closing to 100,000. As our partnerships continue to grow with different partners, that number ever climbs. And then we do have an exclusive partnership with Microsoft. So if anybody is familiar with the MISA program, we are one of the members that was invited into the MISA program as of last year. This is a super, super big award for us to win, something we don't take lightly, but it's an invite only. Basically, we have to prove that we're a product that people can use, and it's going to prove a security track record for them. So we're part of MISA, and then as well as we're part of the founding for MS2 or Intune for MSP vendors. So when Microsoft had rolled out that Lighthouse was product complete, they actually leaned into Enforcer to take over the multi-tenant management piece from them. So we are one of the founding members to help MSPs be able to solve that multi-tenant issue. And right now, we're going to go through how we're able to help you guys make a actual revenue model off that as well. So last time, like I said earlier, we talked about the tenant as the new server, or you guys talked about that with Dakota. So if that actually lands true with you and you're saying, well, I know I want to move everybody up into the Entra ID. We want to use the online version of all these workloads rather than building out these old servers. One thing that we need to take a look at is how you're going to actually manage that. How do you actually run these servers? You are going to try to use the same workflows that you would want to use on that server in the cloud. And you still want to do patch management. You still want to be able to push new policies. You still want to make sure everything's up to date. We're backing things up, change control, policy drift. The list can go on and on and on what you're able to do with the tenant. But the workflow that you guys are using on servers today needs to kind of remain the same as you're working in the cloud. You still need to make sure that every single discipline that you guys are applying in those servers is falling into the cloud with you. Because it is a new server. It's not going away. Microsoft has leaned into the fact that we're moving into the cloud. The on-prem support is somewhat retiring here soon. So as we transition into the cloud, just kind of keep those workflows, or keep in your head that you need to continue to use those workflows that you're currently doing. So if you've agreed that the tenant is a new server, this is where we're actually asking MSP owners, like we're having these conversations daily. Like if you agree with this, most people will say yes. It's, we ask how many servers do you patch and are monitored? The answer usually is 0, because you wouldn't run, a server without an RMM tool. That's almost a fireable offense. Things are going to get leaked. you're going to be in not a great spot trying to actually patch that up on your own. So how many tenants are you guys running that are unpatched and unmonitored? That's the real question that we want to look at. And if you guys don't have a good answer for that and you're saying, well, right now it's more of a set and forget model, that's the whole point of what we want to try to paint that picture, that we need to move more towards that reactive or the proactive, almost, everything needs to be managed on a day to day, because this is where everyone's data is being held. So that's the gap that we're running into these days, is you never run a server set and forget. And that's exactly how much tenants are actually being ran right now. So the rest of this hour is the operating model, how we're going to move from ad hoc to configuration and continuous governance. And that's critically, how you're going to be able to charge for this said model. So the foundational truth of the whole governance argument rests on the Microsoft 365 tenant is not secure by default. It's functional by default. Microsoft has done real work on the secure by default. So security defaults, the sign-in safeguards, the hardening, legacy authentication. But a default out of the box tenant is not hardened. And that's where the gap starts becoming into play. So it's not actively dangerous, the tenant itself, but if you don't actually provide any work or do any sort of configuration, you're basically waiting for somebody to breach that tenant. And it's never like, so for configuration, the way that we always like to look at is it's something that should never be fully complete. And the reason that I say that is you always want to continue to fine tune the policies that you put in place. As Microsoft continues to make updates, you need to kind of follow patch by patch with them and push things out. That also itself could be a whole job, the way that Microsoft makes changes. That's what Enforcer's here to help out with, is to make sure that we're going through those patch updates and we're letting you know which ones you need to be able to push out. But then again, if you guys actually did a Microsoft hardening play in Q1, by Q2, it's probably already drifting based on the changes that Microsoft's put in place. So if you're not proactively looking and making changes towards that, that's going to be a, out of drift or out of policy tenant right there for you. So that's what we want to help out with, is make sure that you guys are hardening those tenants and continuously doing that and being able to charge for that. It's not a one-time project. This is something you guys are manually doing day in and day out, or continuously having to do. This is something we want to make sure that you're able to actually build a revenue stream for it. So the three things that pull tenants out of shape, and bottom line is, this is kind of like the whole reason that things change all the time. So one, your own engineers, human error is kind of the main driver of why things come into play or actually fall out of drift when it comes to IT itself. People sometimes make changes, they don't report on them, or they make a change and they're not sure what actually happened and they don't know what those repercussions are going to be. So making sure that if you're able to talk with your own engineers, we need to document that in that way, so that if they do make a change, we need to actually be able to revert it. So that's going to be one area that actually causes internal drift or drift on the tenant. Not documented, your own engineers, your own human errors. It's just the reality of it. The second, this is the scary one that I always say: if the customer for some reason still has global admin, they tweak a conditional access policy and they forget to change it back. Hopefully at this point, you guys are owning all the global admin accounts to that tenant. But the case, there is some people that still think they're tech savvy and know more than the actual IT provider. That's just the nature of it. Some people are stubborn like that. But in the case of maybe a global admin, the CEO is saying, well, I don't want to use MFA. I'm really tired of signing with the authenticator every day. Like internally, we use Keeper here at Enforcer, and it signs me out every hour on the hour, and it drives me insane, right? This is something that I can't control, but I know I need MFA. That's a problem that you guys need to actually have that conversation with, because if they're going and turning off MFA, that's a huge security risk right there. But also, it's something that we need to be able to report on and show you, say, hey, well, this tenant is now out of your drift because a global admin on that account has tweaked the conditional access policy. Surprising enough, this does come up a lot. You will see people that have this MFA and they just change, or have the global admin just change things without talking to you first. And then the last piece of it is going to be Microsoft itself. So Microsoft introduces new SKUs all the time. Now with E7 coming live, that's going to be something that we'll have to tackle when it comes out, or when people start actually starting to adopt that SKU more and more. But the realistic part of it is that they change policies all the time. They add patches out there. They release different features. things that maybe are in the fine details of that release note that has 580 different releases in there, making sure that you're able to introduce those new policies, and that way they didn't, or you're not providing any sort of gap that Microsoft has tried to put a fix in for. This is something that's hard to do. Microsoft doesn't make it easy by any means because there's a lot going on with it. But then again, you didn't introduce that drift, but Microsoft is making sure that you have a way to fix it. But you have to own that consequence if you don't have something in place for that patch. So these are the three forces that really pull the tenants out of shape. There's ways that we can combat this, but if you're doing it manual, it's not going to be sustainable long term over time. So I guess, and if you guys want to raise a hand, maybe if you want to just get a thumbs up, has anybody made the 50 updates over the last 12 months across the 4 services of Intra, Intune, Defender, or Defender for Business? And there's no harm in this. I see that it's kind of blank right now. And that's kind of the answer that we expect to get is there's no good way to make sure that you're keeping up with this. It's just the reality of it. You have too much going on day to day. And if you're trying to do that, it's one roughly per week. That's somebody's job is to kind of fine comb through those. We have the internal team that can help out with that specifically to help make sure that any of these patches that are going live, we're making sure you guys are aware about that as well. But the reality of it is that Microsoft continues to make changes. We need to actually know which ones are going to be applied that you can roll out, which ones are going to be important to you. And then again, this is just those 4 services. It's not including things like Purview, SharePoint, Teams, Exchange, Copilot, the Power Platform. That list can go on and on and on with Microsoft. So, if you're not actively tracking and evaluating each one, deciding which ones to apply to your customer or an organization in the rollout, then you're not really managing Microsoft 365. I heard this the other day saying if you're not actively applying different patches or maintaining that tenant up to where it needs to be, you're renting it on behalf of your customer and putting your logo on the invoice. This needs to be continuous work so you guys can own that sales cycle and continue to build, not only the governance piece behind the tenant, but that revenue stream, like I've kept mentioning here as well. So before we get into tooling, I want to give a map of where the tenants stand, because and everyone in this room or in this meeting is somewhere on it, and naming where you are is the first step. So we call this the tenant governance maturity model. So there's 4 levels to it, from set and forget all the way to continuously governed. So as we walk through it, locate yourself honestly. We don't have to share it out by any means, but most MSPs are probably in the level 1 or level 2. The goal of this session is to paint the idea that we can help you get to level 3, and that's where you're going to want to maintain level 3 to level 4. This is actually profitable, and where you can actually say, I have defenses in place to prevent everything from going on. And then if any policies do drift, I know automatically that we're able to, redefine it or realign it back to our baseline and preventing any further breaches. So these are the 4 levels to think about. So set and forget, you've turned it on, credentials are handed over, you're billing monthly, no baseline, no monitoring, you resell with extra steps basically. So you react. So basically what you've done is you've turned on the tenant, you've put in the bare minimum, you say, here you go, your tenant's ready to go. That's theoretically or typically what we see most partners are sitting in. And there's no problem with that. But what we want to do is help you guys grow that financial model as well as the governance model to say, well, we're continuing to monitor all this. Reactive is more or less where people think they're at currently. And the nature of that is you think you're in a reactive model or you're in the second step, but really it's, hey, we're only touching this tenant at ad hoc moments. So you've done your hardening for it once at the onboarding, but changes happen when somebody breaks anything. You're not really managing drift. You're not really looking for anything. This is where actually most MSPs are sitting between the reactive and the set and forget. So where we want to move is due to that standardized. So you've written down your golden baseline. You've applied it at onboarding. You're tracking real progress. You're doing enforcement, but it's still manual at this point. So over time, it might decay. But what we're able to do is help you guys update that daily, monthly, as Microsoft makes changes. We want to continue to help you provide those different baselines and policies to all your customers. So standardized is kind of the bare minimum of where you'd say you'd want to sit when you are looking at that multi-tenant management piece. But the ideal state is going to be that continuously governed. This is where your baseline is continuously enforced. The drift is being detected and remediated almost instantly or weekly, depending on your guys' cadence. The tenants are being assessed. You're reporting on the different gaps. You're able to upsell different security packages to people, and it's the only level that survives an audit and commands a recurring revenue. So think the ideal state that we want to be at is going to be in this continuous govern. And that's where we're trying to help you guys move into as you're growing. So the governance operating loop. So when we're talking about this, think level 3, level 4. So what does level 3 actually do mechanically? It runs the loop. So the 4 stages is repeating forever. You push your baseline, you detect drift, you remediate that drift, and now we're reporting on it. So this is an engine of continuous governance. It's deliberately simple because simple is what survives contact with 50 customers and staff turnover. So showing you the loop, this is what it will look like. So your baseline, detect, remediate, report. So here's your 4 stages. Baseline, you're defining your golden standard. What's good look like for you internally. Again, like I've said earlier, this needs to be your secure baseline. It doesn't need to be tailored towards a customer just yet. But right now, we want to make sure that you're covering all the major pillars of Microsoft. Think conditional access, compliance policies, configuration policies, updates, anti-spam, safe links. All of this can be kind of tailored back to CIS, NIST, Microsoft baseline frameworks. But you want to pick one out that's unique or that works for you and your customers, and make sure you're building out that golden image so we're applying it towards everybody that needs that in place. From there, once you've pushed out your baseline and you've actually started to identify your standards, the tech is going to be the next step. So you compare every tenant against that baseline. You're continuously comparing that tenant against that baseline. So that way, if you're ever adding new policies to it, you're automatically making that change for that customer if it makes sense for them. This is also showing you where your drift and your deviations are coming from, because what's in your baseline versus what's in the customers might not match up. And this is where you need to start closing that gap from. So this right now, if you're not working with a multi-tenant management tool like Enforcer, is a manual step that you probably aren't going to be able to do at scale. And that's just the truth of it. If you have 50 customers and you're trying to do this one by one, that is a whole team's job in itself right there. So being able to scale this and be able to do it is something that we're able to help with. And we want to make sure that you guys are able to utilize the tool so that way this isn't something that's consuming everybody's day. Remediate. So remediate's taking a look at your deploy, align, accept, and looking at the deviations right there. So this is where you're actually going to go in and say, well, if drift has actually been detected and it's occurred, do we want to flip this back to how our baseline is set up? Do we want to send them back to our golden standard, or do we want to accept this deviation because we meant to do this? That's stuff that you need to be able to document, but also need to be able to quickly action on. So that way an engineer is not trying to go into a tenant and say, well, I don't really know what's going on with this. Why did this happen? This is showing you, okay, step by step, we did this on purpose. It's documented now. And now we're in a state of it's in a remediated state, or it's actually been accepted as a deviation because we meant to do that. So this is closing that gap, but it's doing it based off of what the customer needs. So when you're taking a look at your remediation, it's either fixing it or you guys are accepting it based on that customer. Then the last part is reporting on it. So a lot of times customers are asking like, hey, we haven't spoken in a few months. Maybe if you guys are using a multi-tenant management tool or your baseline is set up the way you need to, it's like, well, we haven't spoken in a few months. What are you guys actually doing for me in the background? A lot of times that is a conversation that comes up once you guys have your golden baseline in place. You need to be able to report and say, well, I've done this, this, and this in the last 4 months for you. We've maintained 100% of security. There hasn't been any breaches. But being able to show that, showing somebody a tenant and say, this is what this looks like, might go right over the head. So being able to have reports that are white labeled, branded, you can take them to QBR with them. Is something that you guys are going to want to develop as well. So that's something that we're able to help you guys build out. Your white label needs, it's showing you where they're at towards their drift. You can show if there's any drift, as well as where their alignment is towards their baseline. And then, think about it. It's like I said, it's a never ending loop. We're always going back to the baseline. So, if you change anything, you create a new hardening project. Maybe you're pushing out like an Intune project. It's just things you're going to be able to piece together but it's creating that governance over the data as well as tenants. So that way you're able to continue to charge long term for it, project work, but you're also charging for that maintenance piece of the tenant. So I said earlier, there's 4 actions in every deviation with you're coming to remediate. And what I want to talk about in this part is where you're actually going into tailor that policy for that customer. So when detect surface of deviation, you don't just stare at it. You resolve it with one of 4 actions. First one being deploy. The policy is missing entirely. You need to push a new policy out. Most common when you're onboarding a new tenant. So you bring on a customer, you guys have your golden image, right? They might not have everything set up completely to how you would say our standard is. Giving you the ability to compare what's in that tenant versus what's in your image, your golden image, is something that's going to be super helpful for you guys to quickly deploy. So being able to deploy your baseline out immediately is going to help you guys remediate early security gaps and make sure that there's no problems in the tenant and their safe environment. Aligning it to your baseline. So saying, let's think if there's a policy that already exists in the golden image as well as the customers, but maybe it was modified, meaning if they had MFA turned on in your baseline, you had it set to all users, it's enabled. The baseline has that set as your golden standard, but the customer's environment has it set to disabled. Being able to align it back to your baseline, so that way it's automatically turning on by doing it with one click is super, super easy to remediate that process rather than a customer or an engineer having to go in there and do it every single tenant one by one by one. So that's going to be a time consuming process that is tedious that we can help you guys remediate that in one click of a button. The third and the fourth one are going to come under the accepted deviation and a renaming. So every tenant or every customer does work a little different. And this is where I'm saying you're able to do that fine tuning. Accepting a deviation, you're going to say in your head, well, I know the customer has a policy in place, but they don't need it the way that I have it set up in my baseline. So I want to accept maybe a granular deviation of a property of that policy. So that way it's not prohibiting their workflow, but I have my own policy in place and it's going to take on, 5 of the 6 properties. This allows you to document it so that way everyone knows this isn't drift. We meant to do this, but it keeps everything clean and branded on your guys' side as well. The last part is going to be renamed to the baseline. So when it comes to renaming, the reason why this is important is if you're creating a standardization, you want all your team to be on the same page. This way, if somebody's working on a project and they leave for the day, somebody can pick it up and they're not trying to rework on everything that everyone's already been doing. They know exactly where they're at and you're able to, continue pushing on that project. But it actually fundamentally corrects it standardizes on it, becomes at scale. The naming is actually what makes it work. So that way everybody's on the same page. You know exactly what you pushed out there. And that way the projects are remaining the same there for you. So the operating cadence. So governance becomes real when it has a cadence, a rhythm your team runs without thinking about 3 beats. So daily, you're going to want to take a look at automated drift detection. That's against every tenant. Anything that moved, your engineer, the customer, the Microsoft default alerts the same day. You find out before a breach report or the auditor does. So that's something that, an enforcer, what we're able to help out with is if policy ever is added, removed, or modified outside of our platform, we're automatically sending you guys a notification that's saying this policy has drifted. And then weekly, the remediation, maybe have a standing block to clear the drift queue. So you can either go in there, align and accept it, or deploy the fix. It's predictable and batched. It's not 2 a.m. scramble. That's what turns governance from heroics into routine. So basically, you don't need to be the hero in this spot. We need you to make this a routine fix. So that way it's continuing to fix these tenants day in and day out. Because the nature of it is things will drift. That's just kind of how things run. This is going to allow you to go in there and say, well, every Friday we're going to go and try to make sure everything is good for the weekend. And that way the next week when we come in on Monday, if anything is drifted, we have the notification, but we can go in there and make the changes as much as needed. And then, like I said earlier, with QBRs, you're quarterly assessing that tenant, making sure that if they're up to 100%, they're maintaining it and you're providing that proof. If they're not, you can say, well, we're moving to CIS as our baseline, our compliance framework. From here, we want to get you to IG level 1. From May to June, you started at 30%, we're now to 60. come July, we want to, or by the end of July, we want to be at like a 90%. Being able to quarterly assess and run those assessments and provide that documentation is just going to paint the picture of what you guys are doing in the background to provide that security for them. So think maybe on a cadence schedule, these are things that your team are going to want to do. But then again, doing this manually is going to be a lot of work. We want to help you automate that. So I know I've said it a few times, like, why is this hard or why is this impossible by hand? This is going to help kind of paint that picture for you there. So hundreds of decisions times your customer account. So think if you need to customize an entire baseline for a customer, you're building that out time and time again. That's not sustainable. Unless you have a full project team that's doing that day in and day out, you're going to be overwhelmed with work. And then that's just one customer. Times that by 50, 200, everyone's going to be underwater at that point. So it's not just about volume, but like I said, then again, everything is different between customers, and we want to help you guys standardize on that process. That's where that renaming and being able to pull out your guys' golden baseline and apply it immediately comes into handy. So every customer is different. That's just the nature of it. But you guys can help standardize on that same. Well, we're pushing out a CIS baseline. You guys can utilize this, and then from there, if you have any qualifications that we need to meet, we can write this back to CMMC, HIPAA, PCI, ISO 27001. But you're giving the foundations of all that to then tailor it from there with your customers. This is going to give you guys the ability to upsell that opportunity, but it's also that managed piece, because if somebody does come audit that tenant and they need to meet one of these requirements, you can say, well, we've been using these auditing, or we've been using enforcer to push these policies and maintain that so there's no drift. That's how every customer might be a little bit different, but you guys are able to maintain that difference between them. Same thing goes across the board, is if you're looking at Microsoft, there's no way to just clone everything into everybody's tenant. You're manually applying these baselines time in and time out. Some of these days just getting bogged down by creating the same, if they're doing Intune, it's the same buttons you're clicking for 3 hours straight, basically to create an Intune environment in each tenant. Let's replicate that. Let's speed up that time of execution, so that way your guys' team is able to get back to things that they need to be doing. This also helps you guys be able to take on more projects and not really have to hire more overhead. So that way you're not adding additional members who might not really know exactly what you guys are trying to do. This is creating that standardized process that you're able to push out your policies, your baselines, your projects, time in and time out in a safe, rapid deployment. And then again, you can see there at the bottom, the math of the manual effort. So if you do, at 10 customers, it works for engineers. At 50, it stops working. And then 200, you're in that active failure mode and you don't know yet until an auditor breach. It's just things to think about. We want to make sure that you guys are using these. If you have a bunch of tenants, we're able to help you guys use tools to make life a whole lot easier there. And I'm going to check the Q&A real quick, make sure there's nothing. All right, cool. Let's keep on going. So probably the reason why most people attended this is now the actual economics of this governance piece. How are we going to help with making money? Because here's the thing, continuous governance is not just safer, it's the only model that's actually profitable. So let's show you how that's actually going to work for you. So when you're looking at the governance piece of a tenant, there's two different areas that we've kind of seen MSPs working in, and it's this fixed price. It's a set and forget trap. So you charge that one-time hardening fee, then a flat management fee, and that's kind of the old model that people were using back in the day. But the problem is 6 months later, when drift becomes real, you're underwater, and now you're doing that for free. So that's the one-time management, the flat fee. The ongoing configure work is unpriced, it's unbound. Drift quietly erodes in your margin every month, and then you see it until you're underwater and you guys are scrambling trying to figure out what's going on with these tenants. The model on the right is that reoccurring per tenant governance fee, and this is the one that we want to help you guys move and sell. So the scope is the loop. You're setting your baseline, you're detecting, you're remediating, you're reporting. The drift isn't a hidden cost anymore. It's literally the product that you guys are selling. As you automate, margins grow because the tooling absorbs the volume instead of your engineer's hours. It's the same work, but one version bleeds you, the other one compounds you. So think there's ways that we can help you guys grow your business with that, as well as making these money. And that's going to be that governance service line right here on the right side for you. So The tool that has the highest leverage, I would say, or the one that you'd be able to sell off the easiest with comes to Enforcer is going to be your tenant assessment. So now if you are trying to move towards that level 3, that level 4 state that we are talking about, the maturity, how are you guys going to completely run that assessment time and time out? Basically, what Enforcer has built into the platform for you is a tenant assessment engine that allows you to create your own custom assessments. So whether you want to run it back to a CIS foundation, assist Windows 11 Intune benchmark, ISO, NIST2, Cyber Essentials, Essential 8, being able to build those your own custom assessments and brand these, and the platform is going to give you the ability to run these as much as you need to. So you can time bound these as well. They're all white labeled. You can get them dropped into your inbox on the first of every month, so that way you're able to continue to update this. But people are utilizing this for like reporting as a service. This is how you're going to be able to actually say, well, nothing is drifted. Here's how we're doing this, and this is why we're charging you what we're charging you. So you can say, well, if we need to move anything, if we want to upsell you on, an Intune project, you can build out an Intune assessment and say, well, right now, this is what you guys are set up as. Here's your gaps. Here's where you're failing. Here's what you've passed already. But if we want to actually move you, we're going to charge you this fee. We're going to do the maintenance of drift for you. And this is going to be the layout and the foundation of the project and how we're going to get you guys there. So tenant assessment is going to be super helpful. You can run this against prospects. You can run this against your customers. We do have the ability to actually help you guys onboard prospects into the platform if you guys are looking to do so, and run this as a tool to help run their services as well. So the tenant assessment piece is going to be massive as a selling point, saying, we can continue to update your guys' tenants and continue to update you in case you were to get audited, and make sure that you guys are at a very good spot as well. So here's the missing layer that Microsoft doesn't provide. So where do we fit in is basically what I'm getting at with here. The governance plane sits across all your tenants and runs loop. Compliance frameworks align baselines. So start from CIS, NIST, ISO 2700, CMMC, Cyber Essentials. The heavy lifting of mapping a framework clause into an actual M365 setting is pre-built and maintained. You're not staring at a NIST PDF trying to figure out what conditional access policies safely or satisfies which control. AI policy impact analysis. Before you actually push a change, there's an AI that actually explaining what, in plain English, what this will do. So if you break something, what's going to actually happen. So you can show customers there's no more clicking deploy and not actually know what's going to happen. We can now say this is what we're going to do in place. So these two things are massive when it comes to what Microsoft actually isn't providing, and that's going to say we can actually safely deploy you into a compliance framework. And then now we can report and tell you what's happening when we're turning on these set policies. The last piece, and I think probably is one of the more unique things, the biggest in Enforcer, is going to be your tenant drifting. So like I said, when somebody has made a change, Microsoft will not alert you on it. We will. That's the difference. We can now help you safely push a compliance frameworks. We can tell you exactly what it's going to do when something is going to actually get pushed out. And now if anybody makes any changes, we will actually alert you on that. So Microsoft gives you the platform. This is the layer that lets you govern it at scale, though. With that being said, that's all I had on this side. And I did want to show you, if everybody, I know we have a couple more minutes here, so I do want to show you guys how we would do this at scale with an Enforcer. But before I jump into the platform, are there any questions? Anybody wants to go over a little bit, anything more in detail, just throw it in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, I can unmute you so we can have a conversation. Take the silence as a no. All right. So onboarding time, if you're talking about onboarding time for getting Enforcer rolled out, we typically set a 90-day schedule. I've personally never seen a partner take all 90 days to onboard Enforcer into their environments. From the trial kickoff to the day you actually have your onboarding set up, it typically ranges from a month, but we give you the 90-day scale time, so that way you're able to work with our team as much as needed to be able to roll it out safely as quickly as you want. So we pride, I think our implementation team prides themselves on getting people up and running as quickly as they can, because it actually is a super easy tool to get running. But the whole point is we want to make sure that you have all your tenants in there, be able to assess them, and then right from there, you're actually pushing policy. Do you have a light starter pack? How many minimum licenses do we need to purchase to start? Great question. The minimum, so again, I'm not on the sales team, so you'd want to reach out to one of the account executives on getting pricing specifically on like your environments. But the absolute minimum that we're able to offer is 20 tenants. And I say, actually, I shouldn't have said absolute there. Just know it's a 20 tenant minimum. From there, if you have any further questions, I'd say reach out to somebody on the sales side, and they'll be able to talk to you about like what fits with your budget. Cool. So I'm gonna pull up Enforcer. Can everybody see? Can I just get one person to give me like a thumbs up, making sure that we see the platform right here? Okay, cool. Thanks, Dan. All right. So when you're in Enforcer, this is what the home screen will look like for you. And I'm gonna make this very brief because if you have further questions, by all means, we can set up time with people on my team. We can run some demos for you guys so you can get in there. But what we're talking about when you're running this governance piece and how you'd be able to do this at scale is you can onboard all your tenants from here. So it's either through GDAP, your global admin, or this onboarding link that I was talking about where you can onboard your own customers into that environment. Once you have them in there, this is going to be your assess tab. So you can run your own assessments that you guys build out or the pre-baked ones we have into the platform for you. So with foundations for level 1, level 2, level 1, and this is where you're creating your own custom assessments here. So if you wanted to say, well, I want to build out an onboarding assessment or I want to build out a tailored HIPAA assessment, using these checks, you'd be able to say, let's go, we want to do HIPAA. That's how you do that. HIPAA. And let's say we know we need this one, and this one for Entra, Defender, we want this and this. And as you go through and build out this assessment based off of what you're looking for, this is a tailored assessment you'd be able to run against your customers whenever you need to. So let's say we're doing our onboarding assessment. We'll run it against a tenant. Right here is that schedule engine. So if you want to do drop it into your inbox every day, or if you want to do the first of every month, whatever you want, you can also add your own customer in there so that way they're getting the report sent directly over to them. The options are endless on what you want to do with that scheduled engine, but it is super helpful so that way you're continually getting the most live, up-to-date version of that tenant. So give it a second to run. Typically, it doesn't take this long, but if this isn't a live demo or things aren't taking that long, it's what it is. So Alex, to answer your question at the moment, we do not have the ability to assess Azure environments. We're natively focused on 365. So let me run this again. I think I just need to refresh my platform. We sit in the 365 cloud, so we're able to help you. There we go. Detect on SharePoint, Defender, Purview, Exchange, Teams, all the 365 clouds there for you. So this is going to be the assessment. You get your breakdown by category. Here's all the checks that you threw in place to run against it. You can see what passed, what failed. We will show this internally for your team to get the PowerShell script, or if you wanted to use the Microsoft UI to fix it. But the way that we'd want to do this is we get the report. You can export it right here and throw your white labeled on it as well. But then you're coming to your align section. You go into deploy. We're going to find our baseline. So we'll use the CIS library. This is one that you guys would have access to. We can come say, well, we want to tag our policy. We're going to go and grab, the policies that map back towards that assessment. We'll select all. Here's that view impact button I was talking about so you can see exactly what's going to happen with this policy. We'll click next. If this is your new standard, you push this out to everybody. If this is a new company, you click next. We'll deploy with tenant ID. Here's going to be how you pick out your policies. So the configuration setting from here. And then this is going to be your sanity checks in. We're going to push these policies to this tenant with these settings. And if I hit submit, the API key will run and push those policies in 3 to 5 seconds. Once those policies are in place, you'll come up to your alignment screen right here. And this is where you're doing that maintenance of comparison, seeing what's in the tenant versus what you guys have pushed, or what's in that baseline that you created and what's going to be something you might want to think about pushing out to that end user. So your line policies are a 1-to-1 match. Here's your recommendations of policies that are in your baseline that do not live within the customers. You can see what existing customer policies they currently have. And this is your unaccepted deviations where you're allowed to come in here and make those fine tune adjustments towards that customer's environment. So you're accepting your deviation if the customer value holds true, aligning it back to your baseline if this was a deviated state that you want to overwrite with the baseline. How we report on that deviation though is coming from this automate page and your policy change notification right here. So this is what the notification will look like, but anytime policy is added, removed, or modified outside of Enforcer, you get this sent over to you. Your team can pick it up if you guys integrate with one of the PSA tools we have an integration with. And then it comes back to this align page where you're continuing to close that drift, or close the drift, close the gaps, making your changes back to, align to the baseline or accepting that deviation. So with the overall theme of like what we're talking about, those 4 stages of going through, like assessing a tenant, pushing your policy, getting the drift, and then going back and remediate it. These 3 steps we always say is a triplet. We call it a AAA product, but this is where you'd be living to make sure you're maintaining that drift. You're actually providing that real-time governance for your customers. So with all that being said, we can wrap up a little bit early today. Are there any additional questions in the chat for me? I'm happy to answer anything if anybody has anything, but if not, I appreciate everybody coming out and listening to my TED Talk there for about 50 minutes. So, yeah, that's all I got for you guys today. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Going to end the event now. So if you have any further questions, reach out to me. I can drop my email in the chat so that way everybody has it if you guys have anything you want to talk about specifically.